The year is 1692. In a small town in Massachusetts, Sarah Good and 4 others stand moments away from execution, accused of witchcraft. 2 girls have started a chain reaction that would result in the execution of 19 people and the imprisonment of at least 150. But how did we get here? By 1692, Salem was already fractured before a single accusation occurred. It wasn't one community, it was 2 Salems locked in a quiet civil war. Salem town sat on the coast. It was wealthy, outward-facing, driven by trade, shipping, and merchant families who had money, lawyers, and political influence. Their future was tied to commerce and expansion. Just inland was Salem Village, poor, rural, and dependent on farming. Life there revolved around land, inheritance, and the struggle for survival. Families competed over shrinking plots, disputed boundaries, and unpaid debts. Every disagreement lingered, and because of that, resentment grew. Village families believed the town drained them of their labor and resources while controlling courts, trade, and power. Town saw the village as backwards and expendable, and over time, that tension turned personal. The most powerful feud was between the Putnam family of Salem Village and the Porter family, who were closely tied to Salem town. The Putnams were land rich but cash poor, constantly locked in boundary disputes. The Porters, though, were wealthy merchants who favored trade, property consolidation, and outside influence. When accusations began, members of the Putnam network became some of the most active accusers. Many of the accused, directly or indirectly, were tied to the Porter family interest. Another fault line ran between families like the Nurse family, respected landowners who came in the way of neighboring claims. Rebecca Nurse's execution conveniently removed a long-standing obstacle in local disputes. This was a Puritan society where church and government were inseparable. Moral order wasn't private, it was communal. And if sin went unchecked, it was believed that the entire community would suffer for that. Puritans believed that Satan operated from within, using ordinary people as instruments. And so evil didn't arrive as an outsider. It existed among neighbors. And evidence was moral, not forensic. A person's reputation, past disputes, and moral character mattered just as much as any physical proof did. So courts weren't asking what happened, they were asking who someone was. And children and their testimony were taken seriously. The Puritan culture viewed children as capable of sin, truth, and deception. So when young girls reported fits or torment, their testimony was taken seriously. It carried weight, especially when ministers and magistrates validated it. This culture made spectral evidence acceptable. If the soul was real and active, then unseen harm was still harm. The courts didn't see this as abandoning reality. It was just a part of a broader truth. So culturally, dissent was dangerous. Questioning authority threatened order, and public resistance could be seen as moral rebellion. In the winter of 1692, in the home of Reverend Samuel Parris, his 9-year-old daughter, Betty Parris, and his 11-year-old niece, Abigail Williams, began to behave strangely. They screamed without cause, twisted their bodies into unnatural positions, claimed to feel invisible pinches and bites, fell into violent fits that no one could explain. At first, the adults assumed illness, but no physical cause could be found. Local doctors examined the girls and reached a conclusion that carried enormous weight in Salem. The cause was supernatural, something beyond the natural world. And once that word entered the conversation, the question stopped being what is happening and became who is responsible. The girls lived in a crowded household that included Tituba, an enslaved woman from the Caribbean owned by Reverend Parris. Tituba told stories, folk tales, supernatural legends, visions of spirits. Whether she meant them as entertainment or instruction, those stories stood out once fear took hold. And under pressure from adults seeking answers, the girls began to name names. They claimed to be tortured by invisible figures, shapes that whispered to them, shadows that bore the faces of their neighbors. And the first accusations fell on people who already sat at the edge of Salem society. Tituba was accused first, foreign, enslaved, and socially unprotected. Then Sarah Good, a homeless beggar known for muttering curses when refused charity. Then Sarah Osborne, an elderly woman who had violated social norms by remarrying her servant and ignoring church expectations. These weren't random selections. These were people with weak social defenses, complicated reputations, or existing conflicts from within the community. Tituba was eventually freed from accusations after she was forced to confess, but Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne weren't so lucky. Good would later be executed after refusing to confess, famously leaving the last words, "I am no more a witch than you are a wizard, and if you take away my life, God will give you blood to drink." Osborne would die in prison just 4 months after the accusations against her. As accusations spread, the girl's behavior became more elaborate. Fits occurred in public. Afflictions appeared when accused individuals were present. Silence became evidence, and denial became suspicious. The young Abigail and Betty may have started the accusations, but the adults listened. Ministers, neighbors, and local leaders questioned the girls repeatedly, sometimes together, sometimes apart, reinforcing details, refining stories, and treating each new claim as meaningful. The accusations didn't spread because children imagined them in isolation. They spread because the community accepted the framework that made those claims legitimate. And by the time more names surfaced, the pattern was already set. Suffering demanded explanation, explanation demanded blame, and blame demanded a human face. Salem hadn't descended into chaos yet, but the spark had landed, and the fire had something to feed on. And once accusations left the private home and moved into the legal system, Salem crossed the point of no return. Between early 1692 and the fall of that year, more than 200 people were accused of witchcraft across Salem and surrounding towns. Roughly 150 were imprisoned, many held for months in filthy, overcrowded jails. The legal system moved fast and carelessly. Local magistrates relied heavily on accusatory testimony, character judgments, and claims of invisible harm. So as accusations multiplied, the colony established a special court to handle the volume. And as you can imagine, the results were predictable. 19 people were executed by hanging. One man, Gills Corey, was pressed to death under heavy stones for refusing to enter a plea. At least 5 others died in prison, never formally convicted. No executions occurred quietly. Each death confirmed the danger and justified the next accusation, and confessions became a survival strategy. Those who confessed were often spared execution, while those who maintained innocence were more likely to die. This alone inverted the moral logic of the system. Families of the accused were ruined. Property was seized, farms went untended, children were orphaned and forced into dependency. Entire households lost social standing overnight. Economically, Salem fractured. Land changed hands, debts went unpaid or were conveniently erased. The removal of property owners and heads of households reshaped local power structures. Social trust collapsed. Neighbors often avoided one another. Fear replaced cooperation in a town that depended on mutual reliance to survive. Salem Village and Salem Town blamed each other for the crisis. Religious leaders publicly disagreed, and magistrates contradicted one another. By the fall of 1692, even supporters began to recognize the damage being done, not just to individuals, but to the legitimacy of governance itself. The Salem Witch Trials didn't erupt out of nowhere. Puritan beliefs made them possible. Evil was thought to have operated within the community, through ordinary people giving accusations weight. Spectral evidence gave power to those accusations. Invisible harm was treated as real, turning suspicion into proof. Family feuds, land disputes, and rivalries shaped the targets of these accusations. The accusations followed existing fault lines between families, neighbors, and competing interests. And to the everyday townsfolk, the witch epidemic was real, but to the powers that be, it became a tool, an excuse to settle lingering conflicts and enforce control under the cover of fear. So Salem wasn't undone by hysteria alone. It was undone when fear, rivalry, and authority converged, and the very community became its own executioner.